The job listing seemed too good to be true. $5,000 per week to guard an abandoned military installation in rural Montana. After 8 months of unemployment and mounting debt, I was desperate enough not to question it. My name is Jason Miller. 3 tours in Afghanistan left me with a purple heart, persistent nightmares, and few marketable skills in the civilian world. When the email from Apex Security Solutions landed in my inbox, I applied immediately. My apartment in Chicago had become a prison of sorts. Bills piled up on the kitchen counter, final notices taped to my door, and the constant calls from debt collectors that I'd stopped answering weeks ago. The walls of that small one-bedroom felt like they were closing in a little more each day. The nightmares didn't help. Vivid flashbacks to dusty roads and sudden explosions, to friends lost and innocents caught in crossfire. I needed an escape, and this job promised exactly that. Within 48 hours of submitting my application, I received a call confirming my employment. The HR representative spoke quickly, running through the basics: 6-month contract, weekly payments via direct deposit, housing provided on site. Her voice had a rehearsed quality, as if reading from a script she'd memorized. "Mr. Miller, your background checks have cleared, and we're prepared to offer you immediate placement," she said. "Your military experience makes you ideally suited for this position." When I asked for details about the facility, she hesitated before explaining it was a decommissioned missile silo from the Cold War era. Standard security protocol, nothing unusual. "We just need someone reliable to ensure no trespassers or scavengers access the site," she continued. "The location contains sensitive materials despite being decommissioned. Your military background makes you perfect for this position." I pressed for more information. What kind of sensitive materials remained after decommissioning? Why such a high salary for what sounded like a glorified night watchman position? The representative deflected, mentioning legacy equipment and historical significance, without providing actual answers. "Mr. Miller, we have several other candidates if you're not interested," she said finally, her tone cooling. "We need someone who can start immediately." Desperation won out over caution. I accepted the position. 3 days later, a package arrived containing detailed directions to the facility, access codes for the main gate, and a satellite phone with a single program number labeled HQ. A note explained that I would be met on site by a supervisor who would complete my orientation. The package also included a cashier's check for $2,500, half of my first week's salary, paid in advance. That check alone covered my overdue rent and utilities, with enough left over to fill my truck with gas and stock up on supplies. I should have asked more questions. I should have researched Apex Security Solutions more thoroughly, but the weight of that check in my hand silenced my doubts. The drive to the location took nearly 6 hours from the nearest major city. I watched as civilization gradually fell away, first the suburbs, then the small towns, then even the occasional farmhouse, until I was surrounded by nothing but the Montana wilderness. The final hour was on unmarked dirt roads winding through dense forest, climbing steadily higher into mountains that seemed untouched by human presence. As my truck struggled up the increasingly steep terrain, my cell signal disappeared, and the GPS began to glitch, the blue dot of my location jumping erratically across the screen before vanishing entirely. I navigated the final stretch using the printed directions, eventually arriving at a clearing surrounded by a 12-foot chain link fence topped with razor wire. The fence enclosed a concrete structure that protruded from the mountainside like a bunker. A small prefabricated building sat near the entrance, my living quarters for the next 6 months. The only other visible feature was a massive steel door built into the hillside, secured with heavy locks and featuring faded warning signs. The paint on those signs had deteriorated to the point of illegibility, but hazard symbols remained clearly visible. I sat in my truck for several minutes, taking in the isolated facility. The forest surrounding the clearing was dense pine, creating a natural barrier that enhanced the fence's security. Birds called to each other in the trees, and somewhere in the distance, I heard the sound of running water, a stream or small river. Under different circumstances, the location might have seemed peaceful, even beautiful, but something about the concrete bunker half buried in the mountainside filled me with unease. As I stepped out of my truck, the air felt different, cleaner than Chicago's, certainly, but with an underlying metallic quality that caught in the back of my throat. I attributed it to the high altitude and began unloading my personal belongings. A black SUV appeared on the access road about 20 minutes later, kicking up dust as it approached the gate. The vehicle bore no markings, no company logo or government insignia. A man emerged, thin, pale, and visibly anxious, checking his watch repeatedly as he approached. He wore khaki pants and a button-down shirt that seemed a size too large, with a lanyard holding an ID card that he tucked into his shirt before I could read it. "Jason Miller," he called, extending his hand. "I'm Reynolds, site supervisor for Apex." His handshake was brief, his palm clammy. Up close, I noticed dark circles under his eyes and a nervous tick. He blinked excessively, especially when looking in the direction of the silo entrance. "You made good time," he said, glancing at his watch again. "Let's get your orientation completed before sundown. I need to be back on the main road before dark." The way he emphasized that last sentence sent a chill through me, but I followed him toward my quarters without comment. The prefabricated building was surprisingly well appointed inside. A comfortable bedroom with a queen-sized bed, a bathroom with a shower that had decent water pressure, a small kitchen stocked with non-perishable foods, and a living area with a desk for monitoring the security cameras. A generator hummed outside, supplemented by solar panels on the roof. A satellite dish provided internet access, though Reynolds warned it would be unreliable during storms. "Your duties are straightforward," he said, handing me a ring of keys, a flashlight, and a handheld radio. "Patrol the perimeter every 2 hours during daylight. Check the main entrance seal once each night before 10 p.m. Never later. Document any unusual activity in the logbook." He pointed to a thick binder on the desk. "Everything you need to know is in there. Patrol routes, emergency protocols, maintenance schedules for the generator and water pump." I flipped through the binder, noting the meticulous documentation but also the conspicuous absence of information about the silo itself. What exactly was this facility used for? The job listing just said it was a decommissioned military installation. Reynolds shifted his weight from one foot to the other. Titan II missile complex, part of the nuclear deterrent during the Cold War. There were hundreds of them across the country at one point. Most have been completely dismantled or repurposed. This one's different. Different how? He ignored my question, instead walking me through the security system. 8 cameras covering the perimeter, motion sensors at key points along the fence, and a direct alarm connection to the main entrance of the silo. "The system will alert you to any perimeter breaches," he explained. "Animal activity might trigger the sensors occasionally, but you'll learn to distinguish between a deer and an actual intruder." I nodded, waiting for more detailed instructions, but Reynolds seemed eager to leave. He kept glancing at his watch and then at the lengthening shadows outside. "What exactly am I guarding this place from?" I asked as he hurried back to his vehicle. Reynolds paused, his hand on the door handle. "Officially, trespassers and environmental damage." He glanced at the silo entrance, then back at me. "Look, just follow protocol. Don't enter the silo under any circumstances. Report any unusual sounds or vibrations immediately. No photography, no visitors." He climbed into his SUV. "Communications are limited to daily check-ins via the satellite phone in your quarters. The nearest town is 40 miles south if you need supplies." Before driving away, he rolled down his window. "One more thing, Miller. I don't recommend being outside after dark, and if you hear anything unusual from inside, ignore it. It's just the structure settling." With that cryptic warning, he sped away, leaving a trail of dust behind him. I spent the remainder of that first day organizing my quarters and familiarizing myself with the security systems. The cameras fed to a bank of monitors on the desk, providing clear views of the perimeter fence and the silo entrance. The motion sensors appeared to be highly sensitive. Twice they were triggered by deer approaching the fence line, setting off a soft chime inside my quarters. As the sun set, I completed my first check of the main entrance seal. The massive steel door was secured with both conventional locks and an electronic system that required a keycard and PIN code. According to the logbook, I needed to verify that both systems were operational and that the seal itself, a rubber gasket running around the door's perimeter, was intact. Standing before that immense door in the fading light, I felt a sense of unease that went beyond the normal caution of a new job. Something about the facility felt wrong, as if the very ground beneath it was somehow unwelcoming. I completed the check quickly and returned to my quarters as darkness fell. That night, I slept poorly, not due to any external disturbance but because of dreams filled with dark corridors and distant voices. I woke repeatedly, each time convinced I'd heard something moving outside my quarters, only to find nothing but moonlight and silence when I checked the monitors. The first few days passed uneventfully. I established a routine quickly: morning patrol at sunrise, breakfast, midday patrol, lunch, evening patrol, dinner, final check of the entrance seal, sleep, repeat. The satellite internet allowed me to stream movies and browse news sites during my downtime, though the connection frequently lagged or dropped entirely. The solitude was actually refreshing after years of barracks life and then cramped apartment living. The surrounding forest was beautiful, filled with wildlife and fresh mountain air. During my patrols, I often spotted deer, foxes, and once even a black bear at a safe distance. Birds filled the trees, their songs creating a pleasant backdrop to my otherwise quiet existence. On the fourth day, things changed. During my evening patrol, I noticed unusual tracks near the silo entrance, too large for a coyote or fox, but not shaped like bear prints either. The pattern was odd, as if whatever made them had an irregular gait, almost dragging itself forward. More concerning was how they approached the entrance, circled it several times, then simply disappeared. Not faded, not continued elsewhere, just stopped, as if whatever made them had vanished into thin air. I took photographs with my phone and recorded the findings in the logbook, noting the time and location. Standard procedure according to the manual. That same evening, I realized the wildlife had changed its behavior. The birds that previously filled the trees around the facility had vanished. No small animals rustled in the underbrush. The forest had grown unnaturally quiet, as if the animals were avoiding the area. The silence was profound and disconcerting, an absence rather than a presence. Near one of the ventilation shafts that protruded from the ground about 50 yards from the main entrance, I discovered a patch of vegetation that had withered and blackened, though it hadn't burned. The plants looked desiccated, like they'd been freeze-dried and then crushed to ash. When I crouched to examine them, I noticed the metal grate of the ventilation shaft was warm to the touch, despite the cool evening air. I reported these findings during my daily check-in the following morning, describing the tracks, the absence of wildlife, and the damaged vegetation in detail. The response was immediate but unsatisfying. Acknowledged. Continue standard protocols. Do not investigate further. Using the satellite internet, I researched the facility during my downtime. Information was sparse, but I pieced together that it had been one of many Titan missile silos constructed during the Cold War. According to public records, it was decommissioned in 1982 after an incident that required specialized containment protocols. The nature of the incident was classified, but local newspaper archives mentioned unusual seismic activity in the area that year, followed by a military quarantine that lasted 6 weeks. A conspiracy forum contained a thread about the facility, claiming it had been sealed for non-military reasons, following the discovery of something during an upgrade of the cooling systems. One post suggested that the silo now housed a research laboratory studying unique geological samples. Most of the replies dismissed this as fantasy, but one user, who claimed to be a former guard, simply wrote, "Whatever you do, don't go inside. Not worth any amount of money." I attempted to contact former security personnel through the forum, but received no responses. My private messages went unanswered, and when I tried to reply directly to the thread, I discovered it had been locked by the moderators. That night, as I lay in bed reading, I heard it for the first time, a faint, rhythmic sound coming through the walls. Not mechanical, not like machinery or electronics. It reminded me of a heartbeat, but slower, deeper, reverberating through the ground itself. It maintained a steady pace for approximately 20 minutes before gradually fading away. I spent an hour searching my quarters for the source before realizing it was coming from beneath me, from the silo. The sound wasn't being transmitted through the air but through the earth itself, vibrations traveling through the concrete foundation and into the structure of my living quarters. Sleep eluded me that night. Each time I began to drift off, the rhythmic pulsing would return, sometimes accompanied by what sounded like distant whispers just below the threshold of comprehension. By morning, I was exhausted and increasingly uneasy about my isolated posting. During my morning patrol, I discovered more tracks, similar to the ones I'd found previously, but more numerous, forming concentric circles around the main entrance. Again, they simply ended abruptly, as if their creator had ceased to exist. More disturbing was what I found at the ventilation shaft. The area of dead vegetation had expanded significantly, now covering a radius of approximately 15 feet. At the center, the metal grate had changed. Not just warmed, but altered in some fundamental way. The steel had taken on a brittle, crystalline appearance, with small fragments breaking off at the slightest touch. I documented everything meticulously and included detailed descriptions in my daily report. This time, the response took longer to arrive, almost 2 hours. When it came, it was different. Maintenance team scheduled for tomorrow. Remain in quarters during their visit. Do not approach the silo entrance or ventilation shafts until the team has completed their work. The promised maintenance team never arrived. Instead, on the 6th day of my assignment, I woke to find the electronic lock on the main entrance had been disabled. The control panel, which normally displayed a steady green light, was dark. The conventional locks remained engaged, but the security system no longer registered the door's status on my monitors. I reported this immediately and received instructions to check the backup generator that powered the security systems. According to the facility layout in my manual, the generator was housed in a small structure approximately 50 yards from my quarters, opposite the silo entrance. The backup generator appeared to be functioning normally, gauges showing proper fuel levels and output. But the connection to the silo's security system had been severed. Not damaged, not failed due to age or environment, but deliberately cut. The heavy-duty cables had been sliced cleanly, the exposed ends showing signs of recent damage. This was no malfunction. Someone or something had intentionally disabled part of the security system. I retreated to my quarters and reported this development, emphasizing the evidence of tampering. The response was delayed by several hours, eventually arriving in the form of a text message. Remain in quarters. Armed response team en route. Estimated arrival 18 hours. That evening, the rhythmic sounds from below intensified. No longer a distant, barely perceptible vibration, but a powerful throbbing that shook dust from the ceiling and caused the windows to rattle in their frames. The intervals between pulses shortened progressively, increasing in tempo like a heart rate accelerating. Between pulses, I began to hear other sounds, scraping, like metal dragging against concrete, and occasionally a high-pitched tone that made my teeth ache and my vision blur momentarily. The satellite phone and internet connection failed completely, leaving me isolated with no way to communicate with the outside world. I spent the night huddled in my quarters, doors locked, windows covered, watching the security monitors for any sign of movement outside. Around 3 a.m., camera 3, which covered the area near the ventilation shaft, went offline. The screen displayed nothing but static. 10 minutes later, camera 5 followed, then cameras 1 and 6 in quick succession. By dawn, only 2 cameras remained operational, providing limited views of the perimeter fence but no visibility of the silo entrance or the area immediately surrounding it. The motion sensors continued to function, but they remained silent. No wildlife, no intruders, no movement of any kind detected. I was awakened at 7 a.m. by vibrations so strong they knocked a glass of water off my nightstand. The security alarm wasn't triggered, but my instincts told me to check the entrance. Grabbing my flashlight and sidearm, I hurried outside. The morning was misty, the sun barely visible through a thick ground fog that had settled over the facility. As I approached the main entrance, visibility dropped to less than 10 feet. The air felt charged, like the moments before a lightning strike, raising the hair on my arms and the back of my neck. The security seal, a specialized lock with tamper-evident features, was disturbed. The heavy steel door, which should have been firmly sealed, was ajar by about 2 inches. From the gap emerged a faint illumination, not the warm yellow of artificial lighting, but a cold, blue-white glow that seemed to pulse in time with the rhythmic sounds I'd been hearing. Protocol dictated that I report this without further investigation. I returned to my quarters and used the satellite phone, which had mysteriously begun functioning again, to contact headquarters. After a tense 30-minute wait, I received a text message: reapply seal, maintain distance, supplemental team en route. No team arrived that day, or the day after. By the third day, I was starting to wonder if Apex Security Solutions had abandoned me entirely when a severe storm hit the area. The wind howled through the trees, bending them nearly double. Rain pelted the facility like bullets, and lightning struck close enough to make the hair on my arms stand up. The power fluctuated, causing the security systems to malfunction. The remaining cameras went offline. Motion sensors triggered randomly. The generator struggled against the elements. During one complete blackout, as I fumbled to reset the breakers, I heard it clearly, voices from within the silo. Not radio chatter, not recordings. They sounded like singing, but distorted, as if underwater or speaking through damaged vocal cords. The melody, if you could call it that, made no sense to my ears. The notes seemed to overlap and contradict each other in impossible ways. The voices rose and fell in patterns that almost resembled language but remained incomprehensible. Most disturbing was the sense that they were calling specifically to me. My name never appeared in their utterances, but somehow I knew with absolute certainty that I was the intended recipient of their message. That was the moment I decided to break protocol. Storm or no storm, supplemental team or not, I needed to know what I was really guarding. The next morning, after the storm had passed, I gathered my equipment: flashlight, sidearm, a small toolkit, first aid supplies, and a portable radio. I knew the main entrance required a specific access sequence, which Reynolds had carefully avoided showing me, but during my research, I had discovered a maintenance access shaft that might provide an alternative entry point. Behind the main facility, partially hidden by overgrowth, I found the access hatch. The lock was old and rusted, no match for my bolt cutters. The hatch opened with a groan of protest, revealing a narrow vertical shaft with metal rungs embedded in the concrete wall. The air that rushed out was surprisingly warm and carried a metallic odor that reminded me of blood. I hesitated, remembering Reynolds' warning: don't enter the silo under any circumstances. But the singing I'd heard, the strange vibrations, the disturbed seal, something wasn't right. If I was guarding something dangerous, I deserved to know. Afghanistan had taught me never to enter an unknown situation without intelligence. I was done being kept in the dark. I descended into darkness. The maintenance shaft descended approximately 30 feet before connecting to a utility corridor on the first sub-level. My flashlight revealed standard military design: concrete walls, industrial lighting fixtures, non-functional, and color-coded pipes running along the ceiling. But there were unusual modifications as well. Heavy cables had been installed more recently than the original construction, running along the walls into sealed conduits. Monitoring equipment, still operational despite the facility's supposed abandonment, hummed softly in recessed compartments. The corridor extended in both directions. Signs on the walls indicated various sections of the facility: generator room, communications, security, medical. I opted to check the security office first, hoping to find more information about what exactly I was dealing with. The security office was a small room with reinforced walls and a heavy door that stood partially open. Inside, monitors displayed various sections of the facility, most showing empty corridors similar to the one I'd just traversed. One screen, however, showed a large chamber filled with equipment I didn't recognize. Complex machinery surrounded a central containment unit that glowed with the same blue-white light I'd glimpsed through the main entrance. In what appeared to be a security chief's desk, I found logbooks dating back decades. The entries started as routine security checks, but gradually became concerning. April 15, 1982. Unusual readings from Sub-Level 3. Tech team scheduled for tomorrow. April 18, 1982. Containment team arrived. All regular personnel restricted to upper levels. May 2, 1982. 3 men in quarantine after exposure incident. Dr. Hoffman says their symptoms are unprecedented. The entries became more erratic and disturbed as months passed. June 10, 1982. Perimeter expanded to 1 mile. Military presence increased. Something about a psychological contamination zone. July 24, 1982. Lost contact with Team Charlie on Sub-Level 4. Footage shows equipment malfunction, then nothing. Recovery team found no bodies, just their equipment arranged in that same damn pattern. August 23, 1982. It's getting stronger. The barriers won't hold forever. Dr. Hoffman keeps talking about communicating with it. He's not sleeping, barely eating. His eyes look different. September 7, 1982. 2 more men reported hearing the voices. Evacuation of non-essential personnel recommended. Hoffman refused to leave, says it's teaching him things. The final entry, dated October 14, 1982, simply stated, "It's growing. We cannot contain it anymore. Hoffman went down to Sub-Level 5 last night. The footage shows. I can't describe it. God help anyone who finds this place." The next page had been torn out, and all subsequent pages were blank. I checked the desk drawers and found a security keycard labeled "Emergency Access" and a handwritten note with what appeared to be a sequence of numbers, possibly an access code. I pocketed both, my heart racing as I considered what I'd learned so far. This was no ordinary decommissioned missile silo. Something had been discovered here, something dangerous enough to warrant military quarantine and specialized containment. And whatever it was still here, still active after 4 decades. I left the security office and proceeded deeper into the facility. The first sub-level appeared largely unchanged from its original military configuration, aside from the additional monitoring equipment and reinforced barriers at key junctions. Motion-activated emergency lights flickered to life as I moved through the corridors, casting long shadows that seemed to move independently of my presence. At the end of a long corridor, I found an elevator, surprisingly operational, with power indicators showing active status. According to the panel, the facility extended 5 levels below ground, with the missile silo itself presumably occupying the central shaft around which the levels were constructed. I hesitated before calling the elevator. Using it would announce my presence to anyone or anything monitoring the systems, but the alternative was to search for stairwells that might be locked or blocked. Decision made, I pressed the call button. The elevator arrived with a soft chime, doors sliding open to reveal a surprisingly well-maintained interior, standard military design, but with additional reinforcement around the doors, and what appeared to be a decontamination system installed in the ceiling, currently inactive. I pressed the button for sub-level 2. The descent was smooth and quick, the elevator displaying no signs of age or disrepair. When the doors opened, I was met with a completely different environment. Sub-level 2 showed signs of hasty evacuation, overturned chairs, abandoned coffee mugs with decades-old residue, personal items left behind as if people had fled without warning. The walls here displayed strange discoloration, dark streaks that formed patterns too regular to be water damage or mold, yet too chaotic to be intentional design. The patterns reminded me vaguely of circuit boards or neural networks, branching and connecting in complex ways. The air on this level was noticeably warmer, and the metallic scent stronger. My flashlight beam occasionally reflected off surfaces that shouldn't have been reflective sections of concrete wall that gleamed like polished obsidian when struck by direct light. I examined one such section more closely. What I had initially taken for some kind of chemical stain or growth was actually a transformation of the concrete itself. The material had changed composition, becoming smoother, harder, with a subtle internal structure visible beneath the surface. When I touched it, the surface was warm and seemed to vibrate faintly, like touching a speaker playing low-frequency sound. More concerning were the scattered personal effects that told a story of panic and confusion. A family photo in a broken frame lay face up on the floor, showing a smiling man with his wife and young daughter. A lab coat hung on a coat rack, the name Hoffman embroidered on the breast pocket. A wall calendar was still open to October 1982, days crossed off up to the 14th, the date of the final logbook entry. In what appeared to be a break room, I found a bulletin board covered with notices and memoranda. Most were standard military communications, but one caught my attention. A notice dated September 30th, 1982, stating, "Reminder, all personnel to submit for psychological evaluation every 48 hours. Report any unusual dreams, thought patterns, or sensory experiences immediately to medical." Another document, partially obscured beneath others, contained a list of symptoms to watch for: insomnia, time perception distortion, synesthesia, auditory hallucinations, pattern recognition obsession, hypermathematical thinking. At the end of a long corridor, I discovered a sealed laboratory with warning signs in multiple languages. The security system required military clearance, but when I swiped the keycard I'd found and entered the code from the handwritten note, the light turned green and the lock disengaged with a soft click. The door had been compromised. Something had damaged the locking mechanism from the inside, forcing it partially open despite the electronic security. The metal around the frame was deformed, not as if from an explosion or conventional force, but as if it had melted and then resolidified in an altered state. I squeezed through the gap and entered a scene from a nightmare. The laboratory contained specialized containment units, all broken or damaged. Glass chambers were shattered, steel containers twisted open from within. Evidence of some kind of research was everywhere. Monitoring equipment, sample containers, hazard suits hanging in a locker. On a workstation, I found a collection of video logs stored on an outdated but still functional computer system. With shaking hands, I accessed the final recorded log. The screen flickered to life, showing a haggard man in his 50s, eyes bloodshot, lab coat stained. I recognized him from the family photo, Dr. Hoffman, presumably. "This will likely be our final report," he began, voice hoarse. "The entity has broken through the secondary containment field. It's not alive in any conventional sense of the word. It exists as a form of organized energy that can manipulate matter at a molecular level. It influences perception, distorts physical environments, and appears to feed on both electrical energy and something else we can't quantify, possibly fear itself." He paused, glancing over his shoulder at something off camera. "We discovered it by accident during the silo expansion. The drilling broke through to a cavern system that shouldn't have existed at that depth. The entity was contained within a naturally occurring obsidian formation, dormant until our equipment disturbed it. Initial contact resulted in 17 casualties, 3 dead, 14 exhibiting psychological symptoms consistent with extreme schizophrenia and dissociative disorders." Hoffman rubbed his eyes, his hands visibly shaking. "We attempted communication. That was our first mistake. It learns from contact, adapting and evolving based on the minds it encounters. It absorbed our language, our scientific knowledge, our fears. The more we studied it, the more it studied us. And it's patient. God, it's patient in a way that suggests it perceives time very differently than we do." The man's appearance had deteriorated visibly even during the short recording. Veins stood out on his forehead, pulsing in an irregular rhythm. His pupils were dilated, his skin pale and waxy. The physical changes in the facility are just a symptom. The entity is altering its environment to make it more hospitable to whatever it truly is. The dimensional constraints of our reality are uncomfortable for it. It's trying to recreate conditions from wherever it originated. A loud bang sounded off camera, causing Hoffman to jump. His expression changed, a strange calm replacing his previous agitation. I can hear it clearly now. The voices are beautiful once you understand the pattern. It's showing me things. Realities beyond our comprehension. I'm going down to sublevel 5 tonight. I need to see it directly, without the barriers. I need to understand what it's trying to build here. His eyes shifted, focusing on something just above the camera. God help anyone who finds this recording. If you're inside the facility, leave immediately. It can sense your presence. It learns from each encounter, and it wants out. The video abruptly ended with the sound of shattering glass and a scream that didn't sound entirely human. I sat motionless, trying to process what I'd just learned. This wasn't military, this wasn't even government research gone wrong. This was something far beyond human understanding, an entity from somewhere else, contained by accident, studied by people who couldn't comprehend what they were dealing with. I should have heeded his warning. I should have turned back then. Instead, driven by a morbid curiosity I couldn't explain, and I realize now, subtly influenced by proximity to the entity itself, I decided to continue deeper into the facility. The elevator wouldn't descend beyond sublevel 3, displaying an error message when I attempted to select the lower floors. According to the facility map posted in the laboratory, emergency stairwells were located at both ends of the main corridor. I opted for the nearest one, using the security keycard to bypass the locked door. The stairwell was concrete, utilitarian, illuminated by battery-powered emergency lights that cast everything in a sickly green glow. As I descended to sublevel 3, the air grew noticeably warmer, uncomfortably so, like entering a sauna fully clothed. The metallic smell intensified, now accompanied by a faint electrical odor like ozone or burning wire insulation. The humming I'd heard from outside grew louder here, a deep vibration that I felt in my bones more than heard with my ears. It maintained the rhythm I'd noticed before, but now complex harmonics overlaid the basic pattern, creating what almost sounded like music if listened to obliquely. Direct attention caused it to collapse back into meaningless noise. Sublevel 3 had been heavily modified from its original design. The corridors were wider, the ceiling higher, and the walls covered in the same black, reflective material I'd observed in patches on the level above. Here, it wasn't isolated sections but entire surfaces, floors, walls, ceiling, all transformed into the obsidian-like substance. The material wasn't static. When viewed directly, it appeared solid and unchanging, but in my peripheral vision, I could detect subtle movement, ripples and flows beneath the surface, patterns emerging and dissolving like oil on water. The effect was disorienting, creating a sensation that the hallway itself was breathing. This level contained what appeared to be research laboratories, each dedicated to studying different aspects of the entity. One room contained geological samples, core drillings showing the progression from normal rock to the black, crystalline material. Another held medical equipment surrounding examination tables with heavy restraints. A third contained banks of computers and monitoring equipment, all powered and operational despite decades of abandonment. The monitors displayed data I couldn't interpret, complex waveforms, three-dimensional models rotating slowly, streams of numbers and symbols that didn't correspond to any mathematical notation I recognized. One screen showed what appeared to be a heat map of the facility, with the lower levels glowing bright white, indicating extreme temperatures. At the center of the facility, I found what had once been the missile silo itself, a massive cylindrical chamber extending hundreds of feet down into darkness. But instead of housing a missile, the space had been converted into some kind of containment facility. Catwalks ringed the circular shaft, with monitoring equipment positioned at regular intervals. Powerful lights pointed downward from every angle. The walls were covered in the unusual growth, not organic like mold or fungus, but something else. It resembled the black crystal or obsidian material I'd seen elsewhere, but here it was more developed, more complex. It pulsed with subtle light, as if illuminated from within. The patterns it formed shifted slowly as I watched, reorganizing themselves in ways that made my eyes hurt and my head spin. and then I saw it, or rather, I saw the absence of it. At the bottom of the silo, suspended in the center of the shaft, was a perfect sphere of absolute darkness. Not a black object, but a void, a place where light and matter seemed to simply stop existing. It was like looking at a hole cut into reality itself. The darkness wasn't complete, however. Around the edges where it interfaced with our reality, effects similar to light refraction occurred. Prismatic color shifts, distortions of perspective, and occasionally, brief glimpses of something beyond. Those glimpses made no sense to my brain. Angles that couldn't exist, colors outside the normal spectrum, movements that seemed to occur in